I still remember the first time I saw him. It was a chilly autumn afternoon at the university library, the kind of day when golden leaves clung to the edges of the sidewalks, dancing lazily in the wind. I had been buried in a pile of literature books, desperately trying to finish an assignment due the next morning, when I noticed him, a tall figure standing near the shelves, scanning the titles with an air of ease I envied. There was something magnetic about him. Maybe it was the calm confidence in the way he moved, the soft smile that hinted at secrets no one else could know, or the way his eyes seemed to linger a little longer than necessary. When he finally looked at me, I felt a flutter in my chest, the kind that young girls read about in novels but rarely experience in real life.
Maybe.
I'm Ethan, and you are?
Leela.
From that moment, something clicked. It started small, borrowing notes, sharing coffee during late-night study sessions, walking together across the campus as leaves crunched under our feet. Each encounter was effortless, as if our worlds had quietly decided to intertwine long before we met. Ethan had this uncanny ability to make you feel like the only person in the room. He remembered every little detail about me, the books I liked, the songs that made me tear up, the way I absent-mindedly twirled my hair when nervous. He listened, really listened, in a way that made you think you were speaking to someone who understood not just your words, but the emotions behind them. It wasn't long before I realized that my thoughts were no longer just about my classes, my friends, or my family. They had begun revolving around him. Every time my phone buzzed, I secretly hoped it was a message from him. Every time I heard footsteps behind me, my heart skipped, wishing it was him coming to walk by my side. By the end of the first semester, we were inseparable. Coffee dates turned into long walks in the park, late-night conversations stretched until the stars disappeared, and laughter became the soundtrack of my life. I remember the first time he kissed me, soft, tentative, but filled with a promise I thought I could trust. That kiss felt like home, like safety, like a piece of my soul finally recognizing its missing counterpart. Over the next few months, our bond deepened. We shared secrets, dreams, fears, things I had never told anyone else. I told him about my mother's illness, the pressures of exams, and the dreams I had of traveling the world. He shared his own stories, some lighthearted, some heavy, and in each of them I found fragments of the man I thought I could spend my life with. Ethan's charm wasn't just in his words, it was in his actions. On my birthday, he showed up with a bouquet of my favorite flowers, and a book I had been hinting at for weeks. During my tough days, he would stay by my side, holding my hand through the tears, whispering that everything would be okay. He celebrated my victories like they were his own, and comforted me during failures with an unwavering calm that made me believe that somehow everything would always be all right with him by my side. It felt perfect, it felt real, but love has a way of making you blind. I trusted him without question, believed in him without hesitation, and slowly, unknowingly, I handed him my heart, piece by piece, until it was entirely his. 7 years later, I would wonder if he ever truly held it, or if it had just been a game for him from the start. For now, though, the world was ours. The first year of college passed like a dream. We laughed, studied, and made memories that felt eternal. Every glance, every touch, every whispered "I love you" cemented the illusion that I had found someone worth giving everything to. I remember one night vividly. It was raining lightly, the kind of drizzle that makes the city glow with reflections from the streetlights. Ethan and I were walking home after a late-night study session. He held my hand tightly, our fingers intertwined, and pulled me close as we ducked under the canopy of an old bookstore.
Lila, he said softly, brushing a wet strand of hair from my face, I don't know what I'd do without you. You make everything better, everything brighter.
I looked up at him, my heart swelling with emotion. I feel the same, I whispered, leaning into his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. And that, I thought, was love. That was everything I had ever wanted. Little did I know, it was the very illusion that would shape the next 7 years of my life, and the betrayal that would come to shatter it completely. The months that followed our first year of college felt like something out of a dream. Ethan and I were no longer just classmates or casual friends. We had become inseparable, each day weaving our lives closer together. Our mornings began with hurried messages, our afternoons were spent in quiet companionship, and our nights ended in whispers and laughter. I still remember the way he would brush my hair from my face absent-mindedly while studying, or how he always noticed when I was feeling down even before I said a word. There was a warmth in his gaze, a sense of security I had never felt with anyone else. To me, he was perfect. He was kind, thoughtful, and attentive in ways that made my heart ache with gratitude and love. By the second year, our relationship had deepened beyond casual dating. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and small achievements with the kind of intimacy that made the outside world seem irrelevant. I introduced him to my family, who were instantly taken with his charm and easy smile. He would often say, "I don't know how I got so lucky," but I believed it, believing in the honesty behind his words. Ethan's attentiveness extended into every corner of my life. He would leave little notes in my textbooks, send surprise flowers, or pick up my favorite snacks when I had a rough day. The kind of gestures that most people might find small, I treasured like gold. I told myself that anyone who gave this much love and care was someone to hold on to forever. College life continued, and so did our love. We studied late into the nights, walked along the university lawns under the moonlight, and whispered secrets that no one else could know. There were moments when we laughed until our stomachs hurt, and moments when we held each other tightly, sharing our fears and uncertainties. I had never felt so alive, so seen, and so loved.
One day, he said, his eyes filled with hope, we'll have a home, maybe even a family. I can't imagine going through life without you by my side.
I believed him, of course. Who wouldn't? After all, here was a man who seemed to care for every aspect of my life, who had been my companion, confidant, and protector for nearly 2 years. The thought of a life without him was unthinkable. But even in the brightest moments, small shadows began to creep in. It started subtly, slight delays in answering texts, small excuses when plans had to be changed, occasional secretive phone calls he would quickly hide. At first, I ignored them. He's busy, I told myself. He's stressed. It's nothing. Yet, a small part of me deep down began to notice the discrepancies. Sometimes he seemed distant, lost in thought, as if weighing words before speaking. Other times, I would catch him staring at his phone a little too long, his expression unreadable. I pushed the feeling aside, chalking it up to paranoia or insecurity. Love, I reasoned, was about trust, and I trusted him completely. By the 3rd year, Ethan and I had moved into an apartment near the university. It was modest, cozy, and full of the life we had built together. We shared meals, laughter, arguments, and reconciliation, the kind of intimacy that made a person feel indispensable. I decorated our space with photos, mementos, and little reminders of our love. I believed these walls held only our happiness. And yet, even in the comfort of our shared home, unease began to bloom like a faint shadow. I noticed his phone would occasionally light up, but he would quickly turn it over, smile, and say, "It's nothing, just a work thing." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe every word he said, every smile he offered, but deep inside, a small, persistent voice whispered that not everything was as it seemed.
I'll never leave you. You're the only one for me.
Friends began to notice my devotion. "You two are perfect," they would say, smiling at us during gatherings. And I would beam with pride, convinced that this was what love was supposed to feel like. Unwavering, enduring, complete. It wasn't until the 4th year that the cracks began to widen in ways I couldn't ignore. I found receipts for expensive gifts I had never received, hidden among his belongings. I asked casually, "Who's this for?" He smiled, vague and charming as ever. "It's for a friend. Nothing important." I wanted to believe him. I truly did. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and no matter how much I tried to water it with trust, it grew quietly, persistently, in the corners of my mind.
Don't worry, Lila. You know I love you.
And so I fell deeper, deeper into the comfort of our love, deeper into the belief that what we had was genuine, pure, and unshakable. I ignored the small shadows, convinced that our bond was strong enough to withstand anything. I didn't realize then that those shadows were harbingers of a storm I would never see coming. By the end of the 4th year, we had shared almost everything. Our secrets, our dreams, our fears, all laid bare. I had given him my heart completely, without reservation, without thought of self-preservation. And as I lay in bed beside him, watching him sleep with a smile on his face, I whispered a promise to myself. No matter what life threw at us, I would stand by him, just as I knew he would stand by me. Little did I know those 7 years were building not just a love story, but a narrative of deceit that would shatter everything I had held dear.
By the beginning of our 5th year together, Ethan and I had settled into what I thought was the comfort of routine. We knew each other's habits, preferences, and quirks. I could tell when he was tired just by the way he rubbed his eyes, and he could tell when I was upset, even before I spoke. It felt like we had reached a level of understanding that most couples only dream of achieving. But life, I would soon realize, has a way of revealing the truth when you least expect it. It started subtly. Phone calls at odd hours, quick glances at the screen, moments of hesitation when I asked about his day. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing. He's stressed, I whispered. He's busy with work or friends. Don't overthink it. Yet, a sense of unease began to grow, persistent and gnawing. I found myself checking his phone when he left it unattended, something I had never done before, but I always stopped myself. My trust in him was immense. He had never given me a reason to doubt him. Or so I believed. One evening I came home early from class, hoping to surprise him with dinner. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint glow of his laptop in the living room. I smiled to myself, imagining him working late, and tiptoed toward him. But what I saw made my stomach drop. Ethan's face was lit by the screen, and he was typing something furiously. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but my eyes caught a name I didn't recognize. Sophie. He was sending messages that were intimate, playful, and far too personal for a friend. My heart twisted painfully. I wanted to confront him, to demand the truth, but fear froze me in place. I left quietly, pretending I hadn't seen anything. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind raced with questions I didn't want to ask. How long had this been going on? Was he ever truly in love with me? Or had it all been an elaborate illusion? Over the next few weeks, the signs became harder to ignore. He grew distant at night, locking his phone and avoiding eye contact during conversations. I caught glimpses of text notifications on his laptop, names and messages that made my chest tighten with suspicion, and every time I tried to bring it up, he deflected with charm. "You're imagining things, Lila. I love you. Why would you doubt that?" But the doubt had taken root, and no amount of sweet words or gentle touches could remove it. I began to watch him more closely, listening to his tone, observing his habits, and noting every inconsistency. The man I thought I knew so well suddenly became a puzzle I couldn't solve. One evening, after another long day of classes and study, I returned to our apartment to find a surprise waiting for me. Flowers and a note. "For the love of my life. Always yours, Ethan." My heart swelled, and I tried to ignore the creeping suspicion. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he really did love me. But then came the receipt. It was tucked between the pages of a book I had left on the coffee table. An expensive bracelet, bought for someone named Sophie. My hand shook as I held it, the edges cutting into my fingers like the truth was cutting into my soul.
Ethan, who is Sophie?
She's just a friend. Don't overthink it.
I wanted to believe him. I clung to his words as if they were a lifeline, repeating them to myself over and over. She's just a friend. He loves me. He's lying to protect me from misunderstanding. But the nagging doubt refused to fade. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory, every moment of intimacy, every whispered "I love you" in my mind. Was it all real, or had I been living a lie for years? The next few months were a roller coaster of emotion. I oscillated between denial and suspicion, love and resentment, hope and despair. Friends noticed my mood swings, asking if everything was okay. I smiled and said yes, hiding the turmoil that threatened to consume me. Then came the day I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that makes everything gray and cold. I had gone to the grocery store, leaving Ethan at home supposedly working on a project. When I returned, I found the apartment unusually quiet. I frowned, sensing something off. The moment I stepped inside, I heard laughter. A familiar, intimate laughter that wasn't mine. My heart sank. I followed the sound, creeping toward our bedroom, where I saw him, with her, Sophie. They froze when they saw me, but the look in his eyes was not of shame. It was annoyance, as if I had interrupted something inconsequential. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to tear the world apart, but I was paralyzed. 7 years. 7 years of my life. Every smile, every tear, every sacrifice, it had all been meaningless. He had used me. Sophie left quickly, whispering something to him as she went. Ethan turned to me, attempting that familiar charm, that practiced smile. Lila, I can explain. But I didn't want to hear it. The words, no matter how polished, couldn't erase the pain, the betrayal, the years of deception. I left. I couldn't stay. The apartment, the memories, the life we had built. It was all tainted. I walked in the rain, letting the water mix with the tears streaming down my face. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew I couldn't return to him. Not yet. And perhaps never. That night, lying in a cheap motel bed with a single suitcase by my side, I realized something terrifying. My entire adult life, my trust, my love, had been given to a man who didn't deserve it. Every kiss, every word, every promise, it had been a lie. And yet, even in the depth of heartbreak, a small ember of determination flickered inside me. I didn't know how, but I would survive this. I would reclaim my life, and one day, I would show him the cost of his betrayal. The next few days were a blur. I wandered through my life like a ghost, my mind replaying the scene I had witnessed over and over. Ethan's laughter, her name, the way he had looked at her, it was burned into my memory. I couldn't escape it. Every corner of my apartment, every object I touched, reminded me of him, of us, of the years I had given willingly to someone who never truly cared. Friends called, they asked if I was okay. I smiled faintly, muttered vague answers, and ended the calls before the tears could rise. I couldn't trust anyone to understand, not fully. The betrayal was mine alone to bear, a poison coursing through my veins. Finally, after a restless night, I realized I had to confront him. I needed answers, even if they were the ones I didn't want to hear. I went to the apartment, my heart pounding with a mix of fear, anger, and determination.
He opened the door, a casual smile on his face as if nothing had happened. Lila, I didn't expect you so early.
I walked past him, into the living room, and faced him directly. Ethan, who is she? My voice shook, but there was steel in it.
He froze for a moment, then let out a low sigh. You saw, didn't you?
Yes, I said, my eyes burning with unshed tears. And I want the truth. Every lie, every secret. I want it all.
You've always been so naive, Lila. 7 years, and you still think you knew me.
I felt as if the ground had opened beneath me. 7 years of love, trust, and devotion, all reduced to a cruel joke. How could you do this? How could you use me like this?
Use you? I love the convenience, the attention, the security. You were perfect for what I needed, nothing more.
You liar. Every kiss, every promise, every word. It was all fake.
I never promised you forever. You just assumed it. That's your mistake.
I couldn't speak. My mind refused to process the betrayal. I remembered the nights he held me close, the mornings he whispered sweet nothings, the countless sacrifices I had made for him. All of it, meaningless. In that moment, something inside me cracked completely. The tears I had been holding back for days spilled uncontrollably, streaming down my face as I sank onto the couch. The room felt suffocating, filled with the ghosts of the love I had once believed in. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he had caused me, but I had nothing left. No energy, no fight, just an aching emptiness.
You think this hurts me? You think I'm broken? You don't understand. You've taken everything from me.
You'll survive, you always do. But I've moved on. I suggest you do the same.
I couldn't respond. I turned and left, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the city lights blurred in my tears. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even care. I just needed to escape the prison of my own heartbreak. That night, in a small hotel room, I finally let myself collapse. I sobbed until my throat burned and my chest ached. I thought of every memory with him, the laughter, the kisses, the quiet moments of connection, and realized that they had all been a lie. I had been living someone else's fantasy, never truly part of his reality. For days, I avoided everything that reminded me of him. The apartment, our shared belongings, even my own reflection. I felt lost, unmoored, as if the foundation of my entire life had been ripped away. Sleep was impossible, appetite non-existent. I was consumed by a mixture of grief, anger, and disbelief. But slowly, amid the wreckage of my emotions, a spark began to grow, a tiny ember of determination, fragile but persistent. I realized that if I allowed myself to remain in this state, he had won entirely. He had taken my love, my trust, my years, but he could not take my life. I began to write everything down, every lie, every betrayal, every cruel word and gesture. I poured my heart onto paper, raw and unfiltered. It was painful, cathartic, and necessary. I started therapy, seeking guidance to understand the layers of manipulation and deceit I had endured. It was humiliating to admit how completely I had been fooled, but it was also the first step toward reclaiming myself. Friends became my lifeline. They listened without judgment, offering comfort, advice, and unwavering support. Slowly, I began to understand that the betrayal was not my fault. I had loved genuinely, trusted deeply, and sacrificed willingly. The failure was his, not mine. Months passed. I immersed myself in work, writing, and activities that brought me joy. Each small victory, each moment of laughter, each day without him was a step toward freedom. I began to recognize the strength I'd always possessed, buried beneath the pain and heartbreak. And then, one day, a message appeared in my inbox. It was from him. I made a mistake. I miss you. Can we talk? I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling. The temptation to respond, to hear the lies, to feel the illusion of love again was strong. But the lessons I had learned over the past months were stronger. I deleted the message. It was time to live my own life, on my own terms. It was time to let go of the man who had used me for 7 years and embrace the woman I was rediscovering. Stronger, wiser, and unbroken. The betrayal had shattered me, yes, but it had also ignited a fire. I would rise from the ashes of my heartbreak, not as someone who had been used, but as someone who had survived, endured, and reclaimed her life. And one day, I knew, he would realize that the greatest punishment for a liar is not revenge, but the strength of the one they betrayed. The first weeks after the confrontation were the hardest. The pain of betrayal was still fresh, like a wound that refused to heal. Every small reminder of Ethan, the way the sunlight fell on our old apartment, the sound of his laugh in my memory, even a song on the radio, felt like salt in an open wound. I oscillated between anger, despair, and numbness, unsure if I could ever feel normal again. Yet, amid the heartbreak, I realized something vital. I could not let this man define the rest of my life. 7 years had been taken from me, yes, but the next chapters were still mine to write. Slowly, painfully, I began to make small changes. The first step was removing him from my life completely. I packed up the apartment we had shared, carefully boxing away the memories. Every photograph, every keepsake, every little token of our relationship was either stored in a box far from my reach or discarded entirely. It hurt to do it, but each item I let go of felt like a small reclaiming of my soul. Therapy became a lifeline. Sitting with a professional, speaking aloud the pain I had kept bottled inside for years, was terrifying at first, but each session chipped away at the weight in my chest. I realized that the manipulation and betrayal I had endured were not my fault. I had loved genuinely, trusted wholeheartedly, and given my best, and that in itself was a testament to my strength, not my weakness. I also began journaling, pouring every thought and emotion onto the pages. The pen became my confidant, my healer, and my silent friend. I wrote about the laughter we had shared, the lies he had told, and the anger that burned within me. Writing allowed me to face the truth without crumbling entirely under its weight. Friends and family played a crucial role as well. I leaned on them more than I ever had. We would go out for long walks, late-night drives, and coffee dates where we talked about everything except him. Their presence reminded me that the world was larger than my heartbreak, that life had more to offer than the man who had used me. I started focusing on my own ambitions. Career goals that had once taken a backseat were now front and center. I spent hours refining my skills, learning new things, and pushing myself to grow in ways I had never imagined. Work became both an escape and a proving ground, proof to myself that I was capable, resilient, and independent. Slowly the fog of betrayal began to lift. I smiled more genuinely, laughed more freely, and found joy in simple things. A new book, a walk in the park, or the taste of coffee on a crisp morning. Life was no longer a series of reminders of him, but a canvas of possibilities I could paint on my own terms. And yet, there were moments of struggle. Sometimes I would catch myself imagining him with her, picturing their life together. Rage would flare, and I would feel a pang of loss, not just of him, but of the years I had spent devoted to someone unworthy of my love. It was during these moments that I realized the power of choice. I could allow anger and resentment to consume me, or I could use them as fuel to become stronger. I chose the latter. Every tear, every pang of grief, every memory of betrayal became a step toward reclaiming my identity. I began dating myself, in a sense, relearning what it felt like to enjoy my own company, to prioritize my happiness, to make decisions that were right for me and no one else. I took trips alone, explored new hobbies, and reconnected with friends I had neglected. In doing so, I discovered a version of myself that had been buried under years of compromise and blind trust. Then came the moment when I realized that revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about proving to myself that I was whole without him. I didn't need to answer his messages, explain my decisions, or seek closure from him. My life, my growth, my happiness were the ultimate retribution for a man who had tried to break me. And yet, life had a way of testing me. One afternoon while attending a networking event for work, I ran into him. Ethan looked the same, charming, polished, confident. But I felt nothing. Not anger, not longing, not heartbreak. I had moved beyond him.
Lila, it's been a while. How are you?
I'm well, Ethan. I hope the same for you.
That was all. Nothing more. No lingering emotions, no desire for reconciliation. I walked away, head held high, leaving behind the man who had stolen years of my life but could never take the strength I had gained. In the following months, my life continued to improve. Opportunities I'd once overlooked became stepping stones to new achievements. I traveled, met inspiring people, and learned that the world was full of experiences far richer than the ones I had shared with him. I also began mentoring others, friends, colleagues, even strangers, sharing my story in subtle ways, teaching them about trust, resilience, and the importance of self-worth. I realized that my pain had a purpose. It could inspire, guide, and protect others from experiencing similar heartbreak. By the end of the year, I was no longer the girl who had fallen for a charming liar. I was Lila, a woman who had loved deeply, suffered profoundly, and emerged stronger than ever. I had reclaimed my life, not through vengeance or malice, but through growth, healing, and self-respect. And as I stood one evening on a quiet hill overlooking the city, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I felt a sense of peace. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the years lost, they were chapters in my story, not the entire narrative. I had survived, I had grown, and I was finally free. Months had passed since I had last seen Ethan, and yet the memory of him occasionally surfaced, not in longing, but as a reminder of the strength I had gained. Every day without him was a small victory, a confirmation that life could be beautiful, even after betrayal. But the part of me that had been hurt, humiliated, and used, though quieter now, still simmered beneath the surface, not with anger aimed at vengeance, but with a determination to never again allow someone to have that power over me. Revenge, I realized, was not about causing him pain. It was about asserting my own worth, proving that his lies could not define me. I began making changes that reflected my newfound independence. I redecorated my apartment, filling it with things that inspired me, books I had long wanted to read, photographs of my travels, paintings that spoke of freedom. Every object was a reminder that I was reclaiming space, both physically and emotionally, that had once been consumed by him. At work, I excelled. Projects that had once intimidated me became opportunities to shine. I was promoted, recognized, and respected for my skills and dedication. I realized that while Ethan had sought to control my life through deception, my abilities and ambitions were entirely my own, and unstoppable. Socially, I began forming deeper, more meaningful connections. Friends who had supported me during the darkest months became my chosen family. We celebrated achievements, shared laughs, and created memories that were entirely ours. It was a life built on honesty, trust, and mutual respect, the kind of life I should have experienced from the beginning. And then came the moment that truly marked my redemption. Ethan reached out. Again. This time, the message was bold, almost arrogant. "Lila, I've realized my mistake. I miss you. Can we meet? I want to explain everything." I stared at the screen for a long moment. My fingers trembled, not with desire, but with resolve. I had a choice: reply and revisit the pain, or ignore and affirm my independence. I chose the latter. Deleting his message felt like cutting a chain that had bound me for 7 years. I didn't need his validation, his explanation, or his apology. My life was full, vibrant, and mine. That realization, that power and fulfillment came from within, was far sweeter than any confrontation or retaliation. But life, as always, has a way of balancing karma. Within weeks, news reached me indirectly that Ethan's own life had begun to crumble. His career suffered due to poor decisions, his social circle became distant, and the charm that had once made him irresistible now seemed hollow. I didn't feel joy in his misfortune, not cruelty, just a quiet satisfaction that the universe had its way of balancing deceit. Meanwhile, I flourished. I traveled to cities I had always dreamed of seeing, met people who inspired and challenged me, and cultivated passions that reminded me of who I was outside of any relationship. I learned to enjoy solitude, embrace independence, and celebrate personal achievements without relying on external validation. One evening, after a day spent exploring a quaint art gallery, I sat at a small cafe overlooking the river. The city lights shimmered like scattered stars on the water. I reflected on the journey of the past months, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the healing, and the growth. A sense of peace enveloped me. I had survived not by clinging to the past but by letting it go. And then I realized something profound. Revenge, in its truest form, is not about harming the one who hurt you. It is about living so fully, so unapologetically, and with such integrity that the one who betrayed you sees nothing but your strength and success. That, I understood, was far more powerful than anger, confrontation, or vengeance. I smiled, lifting my cup of coffee to the glowing lights. I had endured the storm, and now I was standing tall in the sunlight that followed. 7 years of lies had tried to break me, but instead, they had shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and fully alive. From that day on, I vowed to carry the lessons of betrayal with grace and strength. I would love deeply again, but carefully. I would trust but with wisdom, and I would never forget that my happiness, my life, and my identity were mine to protect, nurture, and celebrate. Ethan was a chapter in my story, not the author of it. And as I stepped into the future, every stride was a declaration. I am free. I am powerful. I am unbroken. The years that followed were a testament to growth, resilience, and the quiet power of survival. Life had taught me lessons I could never have learned in the comfort of love, lessons that only heartbreak and betrayal could impart. The pain of Ethan's deception lingered, but it no longer defined me. It was a shadow I'd walked through, not a chain that held me. I had rebuilt my life in ways I had never imagined. My career flourished, friendships deepened, and I discovered passions that filled me with joy. I traveled to places I had once only dreamed of, meeting people who inspired and challenged me. Every experience became a brushstroke on the canvas of my life, painting a picture of strength, independence, and self-worth. Occasionally, memories of Ethan surfaced, not as a pull of longing, but as reminders of my growth. I remembered the sweet words, the smiles, the kisses, and then I reminded myself of the lies that had accompanied them. It was strange how those same memories that once caused pain now fueled a quiet gratitude for the woman I had become in the aftermath. Love returned slowly, cautiously, like a gentle sunrise after a storm. I met people, formed connections, and allowed myself to trust again. But differently this time. I had learned the importance of boundaries, the necessity of self-respect, and the strength that comes from loving oneself first. Love was no longer a surrender. It was a choice, an empowered decision rooted in wisdom. One afternoon, while attending a gathering with friends, I overheard someone mention Ethan. My heart didn't skip, my chest didn't tighten, there was no flash of old longing. Instead, there was only a sense of peace. He was part of my past, a chapter that had ended. And that ending, I realized, was beautiful in its own way. Closure, I discovered, wasn't about confrontation, revenge, or explanations. It was about embracing life fully, walking forward with confidence, and knowing that the person who had hurt you no longer held power over your happiness. I had my closure the moment I decided that my life would no longer orbit around his choices, lies, or deceit. I still thought about him occasionally, not often, but enough to remember the lessons he had inadvertently taught me. Trust, I realized, was sacred, love was precious, and self-respect was non-negotiable. The pain had been brutal, but it had sculpted me into someone capable of thriving independently, someone who could face heartbreak and emerge victorious. And then came the true revelation. Freedom was more than independence. It was peace. It was joy in the small moments. It was laughter that came unbidden, tears that healed rather than consumed, and the quiet certainty that my worth was not tied to anyone else's validation. I had experienced the darkest of nights, and yet I was still standing. Stronger, wiser, unbroken. In the quiet moments, I would reflect on the past 7 years, the love, the betrayal, the pain, and the growth. I forgave him. Not because he deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. Holding on to anger or resentment would have kept me tethered to the very man who tried to break me. Letting go was liberation. As I walked through the city streets one evening, watching the sun sink below the horizon in streaks of gold and crimson, I felt a profound sense of completion. My life was no longer a story about loss, deceit, or heartbreak. It was about survival, empowerment, and the beauty of reclaiming oneself. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities. I didn't know what love awaited me, if any. But I knew this: I would never compromise my happiness, my dreams, or my integrity for anyone. I'd been used, betrayed, and heartbroken, but I had risen above it all. And so, I embraced freedom in its purest form. The freedom to love without fear, to trust without blind faith, and to live a life entirely my own. 7 years of lies had shaped me, but they had not broken me. They had ignited a fire that no one could extinguish. I walked home that evening, a gentle breeze brushing my face, city lights sparkling around me. For the first time in years, I smiled without reservation, without hesitation. I was free. I was strong. I was finally whole. And that, I realized, was the happiest ending of all.